Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to Talk4, the quickfire podcast where we ask four great questions to unique and interesting people. Behind the mic today is your host, Louis Skupien. That's me, and our very special guest for today, Dean Stott, who's going to be answering some questions today. Dean, please say hi, introduce yourself, and give us a quick rundown of who you are and what you do for those who don't know before we ask some questions.
Cheers, Louis. I appreciate it. Dean Stott. I was ex-UK Special Forces, served in the Special Boat Service, and I was in the military for 16 years. Unfortunately, I had to shorten my career because of a parachute incident, and then found myself working in the private security sector, which we'll probably cover during your questions. Also, since that, I've gone on to cycle the world's longest road, which is 14,000 miles, break two-wheel records, and raise £930,000 for mental health. And since then, me and my family now reside in California, where we are now just tipping the tip of the iceberg when it comes to media projects. But behind the scenes, and what pays the bills and puts food on the table is my private security contracts. And so, we'll cover them, no doubt, during this conversation.
Blimey, that's a serious track record. And no, you're the kind of person who, when someone like me starts podcasting, you're the sort of person that you just think, oh my God, one day you just want to build up and speak to someone of this caliber, this kind of a person. So here you are today on the other end of the screen, other end of the mic. It's absolutely amazing. But I'm going to say as well that on the podcast so far, I've had one special forces operator, a SEAL, an F-18 pilot, and a lieutenant commander in the US Navy. So it's very nice and refreshing. Yeah. Respect to those guys to have a hero from home on the podcast from the UK military. So I'm very glad we've finally got around to someone from the UK. But anyway, Dean, I've got four fantastic questions here to ask you today. So if you're ready to crack on, would you like to get on to question number one?
Let's do it.
Fire it up. Let's get it. So for my first question, Dean, tell me a bit about your backstory. So how did you originally get into the Special Boat Service, or SBS? And what was your inspiration behind it and inspiration for joining? And what was it like being in such an elite special force and going through that selection?
Yeah, so I was born into a military family. My father and my grandparents were in the military. I never really had any aspirations of being in the military myself. I actually always wanted to be a fireman. As a young child, I grew up in a town called Aldershot, which was the home of the British Army. So, it's the home of the parachute regiment. So I'd never heard of the Special Boat Service. It was all the paras and the SAS. But I left school, went to college, and my father used to take us on holidays down to Cornwall each summer, surfing. So I had a real fun attraction to the water and always enjoyed surfing. When I went to college, we had a summer holiday, went down there with me and my mates to Newquay. And what was supposed to be a 2-week holiday for me turned out to be 6 months. I decided not to go back, go to college, and ended up working down there. My father, this was long before mobile phones now, so my father came looking for me in 1994 and found me working in a surf shop and told me that I'd wasted my career. Oh, not wasted my career, but wasted my life, my education. I'm only now, just turning 17. And, for me to sort of silence him, I told him I would join the military. I didn't really have any sort of plans of doing further education. And I thought the military was a good opportunity for me. I was weighing about 67 kilos, I'm 90 kilos now, and I was about 5'7". So my father told me I'd last 2 minutes. It wasn't really the warm, comforting words of advice that I was expecting. But for me, I just ignored him and carried on in that process. I joined the Royal Engineers, which was the army, because my father was in the Royal Engineers. He thought I would be in the military short term, so get as much as you can from the military, get a trade, get what you can from that short period of being in. But 3 years turned to 6, turned to 9. And during this period, I was also doing a lot of courses. I was a commando. I was in the reconnaissance troops in the commandos. I was based actually down not far from you in North Devon with 5'9" Commando. I then went on to become an instructor at the All Arms Commando course in Lympstone alongside the Royal Marines. So really found myself being a career soldier. And normally from people from the army would go to the SAS, and people from the Royal Marines would go to the Special Boat Service. So when it came to that period in my life that I wanted to go Special Forces, they just opened the doors for the SBS tri-service. So you could go from the army or the Air Force. And so much to the disgust of my friends in the SAS, that's what I did. I decided to go Special Boat Service, because at this period I'd done 8 years in Free Commander Brigade. I was now also the senior diving instructor for the military at the dive school down in Portsmouth. And so it's just that real attraction to the water. Started a course with 200 guys, and 6 months later, 8 of us passed and became one of the first army candidates to go to the Special Boat Service. For me, I spent a lot of my time in the military. Always, I love to compete. I got that from my father. My father was actually the army football manager, player, and coach. So there's always that competitive drive in the family, and I continued this through the military. But when I got to the Special Forces, I found myself working alongside like-minded individuals, those who are always willing to push themselves. Those who didn't take things too seriously either. I was very relaxed in the military. I wasn't your grade A soldier with the nice polished boots and stuff like that. I was a bit of a reprobate. And so for me, the SBS was perfect. It's guys that just wanted to get the job done and were continually pushing themselves and driving forward. So for me, I'd reached the pinnacle in my career. I was now where I should be. And so, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed my time in the SBS. And I joined at a time on the height of the War of Terror. It was the busiest time in Special Forces history. So we were doing operations and missions that those before us had been waiting 10, 15 years for. And we were doing 2 or 3 of these a night. And so in a short period of time, I was doing a lot, pretty much what a lot of these kids nowadays play on Call of Duty. That was our sort of lifestyle, day in, day out.
Wow, that's so cool. And no, you've had such a great career going into all this stuff. And I mean, the Special Boat Service, I read up on your website, I think was it you were one of the first people to come from the army and go into the Special Boat Service, which is obviously incredibly impressive and a big accolade to have. And just from what you said there at the very end, I've got to ask it, are you a fan of the video games? Do you like any of them? Have you ever played?
I don't. Well, not that I haven't. I'm not that I'm not a fan. When I grew up, it was the old style Mario. I mean, it was very easy to. All you got to do is press one button to jump and move along. I did have when we were in Afghanistan. Actually, we came in. A couple of lads were online playing those sort of Call of Duties, and for me, I just couldn't orientate 360 degrees. I'd like to see a platform in front of me and know what's coming ahead. So it's not that I'm not a fan. It's just that I'm not used to playing with some of these current games. I went on a course when I was in the SBS. I went on a UAV course in San Luis Obispo in California. And I was alongside the Royal Artillery because they run the course. And I was probably a bit older. I was probably about 30 at this time. And a lot of the guys there were about 18 to 20. And actually, the controls for one of the UAVs was an Xbox controller because the recruits that were coming in were so used to those sort of controls. So these young guys were flying this thing around the sky, very impressive. And it really then showed that I'd never had much time on a video gaming as I crashed it into the side of the hill.
Oh no, that's a nightmare. Yeah, it's definitely slightly different from your old style of Mario Kart and stuff. But no, that it's cool to hear the opinion of someone like you on that sort of a thing. But anyway, so staying on the topic of the Special Forces and stuff. For my second question, I wanted to ask you then. So during your time in the Special Forces, what do you feel are some of the most important and powerful day in, day out practices and lessons you learned that helped you most to fulfill your full potential while in the military and after it?
Yeah, I think one of the things is it's a quote I actually used when I was down on the training team at Livingston, and I continue it throughout my time in the military and when I left, is that anticipation is worse than participation. A lot of people will self-analyze and they'll almost self-doubt. They'll say that I can't do that. I'm not capable of doing that, and won't actually take that initial first step. And it's actually one of those ones when you actually then get to the end, you sort of look back and think, actually, it wasn't wasn't that bad. So for me, in everything that I do, I approach, I don't look into it too much. For me, there was a lot of guys on selection actually who, from a young age, all they ever wanted to do was be in the special forces. So straight away, they're already under their own sort of self-induced pressure. For me, as I touched on, I never really had any aspirations of being in the special forces. Just a place I found myself, and so I didn't really take it. Not that I didn't take it serious. I didn't. I just thought, let's just get through the day. Let's see how far we can get through. And also, another thing that I tend to do is not look beyond. Don't look too far ahead. Special forces selection is 6 months long. On day one, you're not looking at 6 months later getting your beret and belt. All you're looking at is, what do you need to do today to get here tomorrow? You know what I mean? How do I get here tomorrow morning? And then that's it. And before you know it, you've done a day. You're ticking through, and before you know it, 2 months has passed, 3 months has passed. The numbers are starting to dwindle, and then you're getting also more confident physically and mentally as well. The ethos of the special forces, one of them is humor, and you need a sense of humor. On the courses like this, when it gets dark times and hard times, you need to sort of really, sort of just looking internally and just laugh at the situation that you're in. And that's what I liked about the military. There were certain characters. I know I was one myself. It was very humorous, and when it is dark times, just do a little one liner and bring everyone up. So humor is a big one. And also, don't compare yourselves to others. I saw guys that went on selection, great guys, legends, and they would come back, and it's like, oh, well, I don't think I belong. I think I'm going to struggle. You are unique yourself, and that's the good thing about selection. It's not the fittest person they're looking for, because you can have the fittest person, but at the end of the day, if they don't know how to operate the radio, then they're not suitable for the role. So just go in there. There has to be an element of self-confidence, rather than self-doubt. But there's also a fine line between confidence and arrogance as well. So it's just finding that balance. And I used to get that written a lot on all my confidential reports. It's like, there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. But I was a confident individual, and I knew my sort of capabilities. So they're my sort of main ones. Is don't overthink it. Just do each day at a time, and just get there to the next morning.
Definitely. I think those are all really, really strong points. And I think that the nice thing about what you said there is that I feel like all of those points are really applicable to the civilians and the people outside of the military as well. So I've been in sport for many years, and I can totally see how when you start looking at a big project or a big goal or a tournament or something that's really far ahead into the future, and you start to just think, can I really do this? It seems so far away. It seems so hard, and there's so much work to do. But when you start to just break it down into those small goals, and then the medium one, when it becomes just get through this session, just achieve this small goal, just get this percentage increase, everything just becomes so much easier, and it's so much more manageable, doesn't it? For sure. And I like what you said as well about, it's not all about just being the fittest guy. People can surprise you, can't they? There can always be that little double-edged sword to someone, or someone can have their strengths, and we're all a different mix, aren't we? We're all a little bit different. We've all got a strength, we've all got a weakness, and no, those are all really good points. And for something I want to ask as well, not on the script, just something I was thinking about before the podcast, and this is such a basic question, but I really want to ask it, so I'm going to go for it anyway. But talking about practices and routines of a special forces operator, I'm sure you've heard it a load of times, but what does the morning routine look like for a special forces SBS operator? How do you jumpstart in your day? I'm just really curious.
It all depends what we're doing. The great thing about the special forces is each day is different. Each day is very different, and so to have a routine, I wouldn't go into a routine. I suffer a lot with very much OCD. I like to have a routine. Everything needs to be in a certain order. But for us, it all depends. A big breakfast is always a key one for me. Everyone's unique. There's guys that, if you're starting a day doing PT, they're like, oh, well, I won't have a big breakfast. I can't. For me, I have to have a big breakfast. I need to have a coffee and a breakfast. And just look forward to the day ahead. I say each day different. Maybe parachuting, you may be doing maritime counterterrorism, maybe diving, you may be on the ranges. It's like it's always different. But I always made sure, though, actually, here's a good point. I always made sure that whatever I needed for that next day was done the day before. So as soon as I wake up, it's done. So all I have to do is have my coffee and my breakfast. So actually, my morning routine is always done the day before. Like we have, it's just a simple thing in the military. At the end of the day, all the vehicles are filled up. Because you don't want to be doing it in the morning, because then we're on very strict timelines. Especially with some of the training exercises. And if one of those things isn't done, it then has a knock-on effect. So our morning routine is done the night before. So all you need to do is literally get a shower, dress, coffee, breakfast, and then head out, depending whatever you're doing that day.
Yeah, I really like that, and that's such a special forces approach to it, isn't it? But I think for people who are listening as well, who are outside of the military, they can really apply that. I know you don't have a truck or a tank or something to fill up the night before, but even if it's just getting the gym kit ready and stuff, and if it's just getting your pre-meals ready and just having your knock on ready for that morning, so that things are a bit easier in the morning, because let's face it, we all get groggy in the morning, don't we? If you don't sleep well that night or something, you might just think, oh my god, I've got too much to do this morning, I'm not going to go to the gym, I don't want to do this. But if it's already laid out for you, it just makes it so much easier to stick to the things you have to do, for sure, doesn't it?
Yeah, and mentally you're in a good place as well for the next day. You know that everything's done for the next day. It helps you sleep easier. There's nothing worse than knowing you've got to do something in the morning and things like that, because you won't have a full night's sleep. So, making sure everything's done. You may have to stay up a little bit later, but knowing it's done, for me, always made sure I had a good night's sleep, because all I had to do, like I said, I knew everything was ready. Just get up, have breakfast and coffee.
Yeah, I can see how that works as well, because if you know everything's done, everything's ready for you, you're good to go. It must provide so much more relaxation for you as well in the night, thinking, well, I'm not going to have to bust my balls to be there on time, and I don't have to get all this done to get to work on time or get to the gym on time before
Yeah.
work or something. And it just makes things so much easier. But anyway, so look, we've covered the part of the military career and stuff, and we've gone through some of the tips and tricks and stuff, tips of the trade, and there it is, the morning routine. But I want to talk a little bit now about after the military, because I mean that's some of the stuff you've done is just incredible. So as I understand it, for my third question, you had a terrible accident during a high altitude, high opening jump, which severely injured you and sent you into a bit of a spiral. And then you've gone on to recover and cycle the 14,000-mile Pan American Highway and raise $1.4 million for a mental health charity. I was wondering if you could tell us the full story of what exactly happened and what it took mentally to get back on your feet and then go to accomplish these amazing things.
Yeah. So as you touched on, I'd done 16 years. I was going back out to Afghanistan, pre-deployment training, and I was doing a hey-ho jump. I'd done loads of hey-ho jumps before. It was actually because we had some new lads in the squadron. They were qualifying it, so we just jumped on, do some fun jumps, as they say. And yeah, I exited the aircraft, and straight away I knew there was a problem. My leg was up in the lines above my head where it shouldn't have been, and then the parachute opened. And so hey-ho is high altitude, high opening. You exit the aircraft at 15,000 feet. Parachute will open straight away, and then you'll travel towards the target area. So it can be anything up to 30 minutes in the air, up to 50 kilometers, depending on the winds. And so my leg when the parachute opened, pulled my leg up over my head and to the right. And straight away, the pain was, I've never had pain like it before. Probably heard me at the DZ screaming out. And, but my first concern was, how was I going to land it? I damaged one leg and I needed to land it on one leg. So I managed to land it. It was a great landing, landed one-legged. But I tore my ACL, my MCL, my lateral meniscus in my knee, my hamstring, my calf, and my quadricep. So all the supporting muscles. So all I'd ever known up until now was the military. I was in a period of my life where I was, as I mentioned before, I'd reached the pinnacle, and then to be told, it's time to leave. I never had aspirations of leaving the military. I was a lifer, and so quickly found myself having to find some work. And without sounding like Liam Neeson, people with our skill sets tends to work in the private security sector. A lot of my friends were actually doing a lot off the east coast of Somalia, with the anti-piracy, and I didn't want to sort of, start competing with their companies. I wanted to do something on my own. And so within 48 hours, I was in Libya helping set up one of the British embassy projects in Benghazi, and soon identified that the Libyans didn't want to be in another Afghan or Iraq. But all these big security companies who were supposed to have crisis management and evacuation plans in place didn't actually have them. And they were charging 6-7 figure sums to some of their clients. So I bought 30 weapons off the black market. I buried them between Tunis and Egypt and designed my own evacuation plans. And so for me, I was now working in the security industry. Those were sort of some of the jobs I was doing. Each phone call was different. One phone call, could you train the Kurdish special forces? Next phone call, can you take the UAE Royal Family super yacht from Barcelona to Maldives? So I'd only, up until now, I'd only known the military side of stuff. I was now getting exposure to the private security sector. And I was actually doing more sensitive jobs as a civilian than I was when I was actually in the military. 2012, when the American ambassador got killed, there was a movie called 13 Hours. I was there that evening, and I safely got an oil company back to Tripoli from Benghazi. And then 2 years later, I received a phone call from the Canadian embassy telling me that I'd been stuck in Tripoli. So I single-handedly evacuated the Canadian embassy, 18 military and 4 diplomats from Tripoli to Tunis. And this is where we now lead on to the bike ride. This is now 5 years of private security stuff. And my wife's like, enough's enough. I'd only been home 21 days in a 365-day calendar. So my injured leg now was 2 kilos lighter than my good leg. And my wife sort of said, look, if you keep living like this, you will either be dead or divorced. And that's chapter 16 in my book, dead or divorced. And so, I took a sabbatical from the security industry and started working with my wife. She was a property developer. But I know straight away she could see, especially with my backstory, I wasn't really interested in sitting in these meetings. I needed to do something else. So I just bought a push bike off Amazon. I was just cycling 8 miles to the office, 8 miles back. And I said to my wife, I fancy doing a world record. It was about a month before my 40th birthday. And so she then found the world's longest road, which runs from southern Argentina to northern Alaska. It's 14,000 miles, 14 countries, 2 continents. So it's the equivalent of cycling from London to Sydney and then another 4,000 miles. That's how long it is. And so for me, I'd only cycled 20 miles and I thought, perfect. That's the perfect challenge for me. It sounds quite arrogant, but I sort of knew that cycling wasn't hurting my leg. It wasn't, my injury wasn't going to slow me down. Endurance wise, I had that sort of, I've been through those tests before on selection. I just needed to learn how to cycle and take everything I'd learned before now and drop it into cycling. So I applied for the world record, which at the time was 126 days. 6 weeks later, Guinness came back and said, yes, you've been successful on your application. But the world record was now 117 days because someone else had just beaten it. So I now had my target. And I trained for a year, do a lot in the philanthropy area in regards to charities, especially military charities. And so I reached out to a friend who was actually a guy called Prince Harry. Him and I had known each other 15 years now. We're on the same JTAC course. And I told him about my challenge and sort of said, what challenge or what campaign should we do this for? And he was just about to launch a campaign with his brother and Kate called Heads Together, which is around mental health. And so, I got brought in on that and asked if I could do it for there. So I had a target of 117 days to beat, and I set a target of £1 million, trained for a year. My wife ran the whole campaign, did all the fundraising, got the sponsorship, and then set off. It's a great story. I focus more on the importance of planning and being prepared, but actually the success of this challenge was being reactive to the situation that kept changing as I went along. The spoiler is, I did it in 99 days. I smashed the world record by 17 days, became the first man in history to do it under 100 days. And as you touched on there, raised $1.3 million for mental health.
That is just monumental is the only word I can honestly think of to describe that. That is just absolutely incredible. And I like it. Well, the first thing I thought was he set out to do 1 world record. He got 2. He's a legend. That's incredible. And one thing I do want to ask actually about that then is how many punctures did you have to deal with in that course of 14,000 miles?
Yeah, so when I was doing when I was applying for the world record, there was no distinction between supported and unsupported. So I was well, I'm a new cyclist, so if I can get a support team, then great, especially as a mechanic. And I was going to all these bike shows, and I remember going to one of the bike shows. I think it was in London actually, and I saw one of the tire brands, let's say Schwalbe actually, and they had tubeless tires. So you don't get punctures. It has like a liquid in it, but it will self seal.
Wow.
So then you can at least get the bike ride out the way. And that's like the future of cycling. And so we had all sorts different wheels, different tires, and majority of the time was on tubular. It wasn't until day 13 I got my first puncture, and that's because it wasn't because I went over anything. I saw this sign in the distance as I was going downhill, and the traffic was filtering from 2 lanes to 1. And I could see beyond the sign that there was no traffic, so I thought I'll just duck under the sign and just go through. So I was doing about 40 mile an hour. Because I was so focused on the top of the sign, I wasn't aware at the bottom of the sign there was actually a bar that ran across the bottom. So I went from nearly 40 mile an hour to stop and bounce through. So that was where the first puncture came from. And I know in Mexico, I remember in Mexico we had a few issues with punctures. But yeah, the majority was actually quite good. You'd be quite surprised, when you think about 14,000 miles, you think you're going to be on gravel tires. Actually, the only time in South America was a 10 kilometer border. It's like no man's land between Chile and Argentina. There was nothing, no one there. I don't think anyone wanted that piece of land, but it was gravel. And so I used the gravel tires then. And the rest of South America was actually nice, smooth roads, which really surprises you when you think about it. And then the next time I needed gravel tires was the last 400 miles, which is Dalton's Highway, which takes you to the Arctic Ocean. And that's where they film Ice Truckers, the famous TV show on that. That was it. The rest was actually really, really nice, slick tires, which surprised me.
Blimey, that's such a cool innovation. I actually haven't heard of that before, but what I do know is that I'm a bit jealous now because I go for a bike ride for about 50 minutes to an hour or something on my country roads around here. And I can only say that I've probably spent the equivalent time disassembling my bike and pulling out busted inner tubes and stuff. Probably about the same amount of time as I have doing the cycling around the place. So definitely something
check out Tubular.
I will. That sounds really good. Like I said, cool innovation. That must be the future of cycling and stuff. So yeah, I'll have a look at that. But one more thing, just I want to ask about that as well, just from the mental side of things too. And I think this will tie in very well from what we said on the previous question as well about how we can kind of, when things seem so far away, they seem very daunting. I mean, 14,000 miles, that's no joke. You must have had to break things down into individual goals. But during that cycle, I did want to ask, what did it take for you to dig in the hardest moments, mentally, when the end seemed so far off and yet the body felt so broken? Was there something that you told yourself to keep fighting on?
No, I think I took what the knowledge that I had from the special forces in there. We touched on before about day one and looking 6 months ahead. If you look at the 14,000 miles, like I said, it would just consume you. So I broke it into countries, broke it into days. I wasn't one of the endurance cyclists who can stay on a bike for 14 hours. Nutrition was going to be key for this project as well. I was going to be losing weight from the day I started, so I needed any opportunity to be getting off the bike and eating. So as when you go for a bike ride, as you touched on, at some point you're going to have it's like a loop, innit? You do a loop and come home. At some point you're going to have a headwind, at some point you're going to have a tailwind. So for me, because I was going in one direction, I either had a headwind all day, a side wind or a tailwind. So I would have a big breakfast, and then I'll just get on the bike and cycle as fast as I could for 2 hours. And what that would do would then give me the average speed for the day, because I knew what I needed to achieve for that day. I'd get off the bike, and it was 30 minutes for food, water, whatever I was eating. And I was quite disciplined in my timing. It was 30 minutes and I was back on the bike. I wasn't having a selfie with a llama. I wasn't chatting to the documentary team. And then all I would do, because if you have any creepage there, it has creepage and it has a knock-on effect. And all I would then do is look at the next 2 hours. I wouldn't look at that afternoon. I wouldn't look at the next day. And so for me, mentally, I was doing 4 training rides a day. I wasn't doing a world record. Before I'd done it, I'd done a day, done a week, done a country, done a world record. So that's how I managed it mentally. The first 10 days are always going to be hard, always hard, whatever challenge you do, because your body doesn't know what it's asking of you. Or what you're asking of it, sorry. So after the 10 days, I knew the 10 days were going to be difficult. Once I got through that, my body then just kicked in. 150 miles a day was just normal, whereas before it wasn't. The first week, we had really strong side winds. Living in Aberdeen, when I was living in Aberdeen, I was used to the winds, but this wind was relentless. And so, it was really slowing up my progress. The world record, as we touched on, was 117 days. I was aiming for 110, and it wasn't because I wanted to smash it by a week. It's because when I was looking at doing all the planning, there was things out of my control, like natural disasters, coups, third-party influence. So I gave myself that fudge. So my target was 110 days. So should we encounter any of that, it would eat into that. I think the worst position I was on this challenge by the end of the first week with the strong winds, I was 39 miles behind target, but my target was still a week ahead of the world record. From then on, everything was the winds were better, the weather was better. So I was never behind, I was always ahead, which helped mentally, like I said. So I see people doing challenges and they're like, well, I'm 10 miles behind today. I'll catch that up tomorrow. But you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You could have another bad day, maybe 20 to 30 miles behind. So for me, I would rather make sure that you've done it, because then, as we touched on before, everything's done the night before. So then when you wake up in the morning, you're where you should be. So for me, I was always not lucky, because I'd planned it well, that I was ahead and I was always then gaining. But of course, there's times where it gets dark and you're tired and things like that. And, music was always a good partner. But also, I touched on the mental health charities. There was 11 mental health charities ranging from postnatal depression for young children, teenagers, to fully grown adults and veterans. So one of the charities was Place to Be, and the money that we raised for them enabled 14,000 children to speak to specialists in their school. So the way I then related that was every mile I was cycling enabled one child to speak to someone. And so that takes your mind off the pain. And that's just one charity. There was 11 charities all benefiting from that. Thousands of people benefiting from that. So that also makes it a bit easier as well.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that's such a powerful driver. And I can imagine that if you're in one of those moments where it seems so far off, but so hard, you can almost kind of forget how far you have to go. You can just think next mile, next kid kind of thing as well with it. That must really, really help you so much. And okay, you've piqued my curiosity then. So was there a playlist or an album or an artist who got you through that whole thing? Or was it just everything bundled?
There's a number of playlists, I changed some, it just depended on what mood I was in, so sometimes in the morning, something a bit more relaxed. In the afternoon, if I wanted to, if I wanted to get some speed, it'd be a bit more dance. But everything from ABBA to ZZ Top is what I'd probably say.
Okay, brilliant. I'll have to check. I'll have to get some of them out for my next bike ride and gym sessions and stuff. But anyway, so for my fourth and final question, Dean, slightly deeper subject this one. So when I was doing my research on you and stuff, and I saw the About Dean video on YouTube and stuff, and you were talking about how hard it was after the incident that happened to get back on your feet and to get back to where you were. And you've obviously done such a fantastic job with getting back to this incredible person you've become and achieving these things and stuff from that place. So I kind of want to ask something for the listeners, for anyone going through a hard time now. So my fourth question, if you could speak to or be heard by people around the world who had a hard time, an accident or an incident or something that's put them in a dark, deep hole, in reflection, what would you say to help them get out of that place and start on a journey in life that has unlimited potential? Any tips for them?
Yeah, so obviously when you're in that position, you think that's it. You never look beyond what's in front of you, and you're in that dark hole. For me, I'd gone from being a very physically robust individual. That's how I got to where I was in the SBS. So not being even able to run 100 meters now without my knee giving way. So also I was going for what's called an identity crisis. You tend to find it not just in the military or special forces or sport. You've gone from working in a tight-knit unit, to now what is my tribe? What is my new tribe? As humans, we like to be part of a tribe. And so I had left that tribe and didn't know where I fitted.
Mm.
So it's only on reflection I was going through this. I didn't know this at the time. Thankfully for me, my wife was a great support network. And so she took it upon herself to put her career on hold to really sort of push me forward. So for me, it was like, you can't do it on your own. You have to have a team around you. And so, yeah, don't be scared to sort of ask for help, and don't worry, think there are dark days and there are brighter days. For me, it was one of them ones where, look, I can't run anymore. So what can I do though? And so if there's things that have blocked, okay, right, we're not going to do that, but what can we do? I know that I can cycle. I know I can kayak. There's lots of other things. For me, we talked about the mental health aspect of it. When I first got introduced to the Royal Foundation and we were talking about the messaging, my messaging on this challenge was physical activity helps your mental state. So I know, there's obviously there's communication, which is key. There's medication, which you want to try and avoid, but physical activity is helps with your mental health. So for me, I know me as an individual. My wife knows me. If I'm grumpy or stuff, I just need to do some sort of physical activity. I'm not saying go cycle 14,000 miles, because that's ludicrous. But even if you go out on your bike for 15 minutes, or even you go for a walk for 20 minutes, just do something. Just keep yourself physically active. But I know that though it's easier said than done. I know that those who are going through hard times tend to just sort of stay at home and sort of dwell on their situation. But if you can get out and just do some sort of physical activity, it does clear your mind. And that's where it was with the bike ride with me. It sort of just really cleared my mind, and I could end up I just daydreamed. Actually, a lot of my good ideas come when I'm on the bike. I have to actually stop and just type in my notes as well. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help. Maintain physical activity if you are a physically active person. And yeah, it does get better.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I totally feel that too, especially with exercise. Just getting into the gym, and no matter what you're going through, if you can just get to the gym, it releases stuff in your brain and you just feel better instantly. And just to quote, actually, I know you've been on his podcast, but Jocko, I'm a big fan, and he always said as well that when you're injured or ill, just do what you can, whether that's if you've got an injured leg, start working the arms, or just treat things as an opportunity to spend time on the things you wouldn't usually have time for. If you're ill, work on drawing, creating, blogging, just keep doing something. It's when you start giving up and you start just staying in bed for too long and binging on certain things, series, and start eating unhealthy, it all just spirals out of control, doesn't it? But
it does,
yeah, for sure. No, it's no, great points there, Dean. I think I really hope that someone gets to hear this, and I'm sure they will. And but anyway, that is our 4 questions done for today. And before we wrap this up, Dean, it is time for what I like to call the shameless plug. So, Dean, look, I know that you've got this amazing book that's come out. It's in the UK right now. I've got quite a few fans from the US military on the show as well. I know that's coming out soon. So yeah, like I said, feel free to just take a minute and promote anything that you're working on, you want people to take a look at, or just something you believe in.
Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, as you touched on, my book Relentless got launched in the UK. As I now live in the US, and when I first came to the US, you already mentioned I went on Jocko's podcast, and then I had other big exposures with People magazine, which are huge here. And so I spoke to my publisher and I said, look, I'm going on this guy's podcast. It's quite big, but they weren't interested. And Jocko, we got 1.6 million downloads just on YouTube on that one. Jocko took me to like #1 on Kindle. So my wife, as I briefly touched on her, she's the brains behind everything. It's the brains and the brawn. And so she bought the rights for the US and Canada. And so what we've done is we've added a couple more stories to it. We've Americanized the book because in the UK it was endorsed by some very famous adventurers, so Ranulph Fiennes, Leveson Wood, and Bear Grylls. Whereas in the US they don't really know them. So we've got Jocko Willink, Admiral McRaven, and kept Bear Grylls. We've changed the book cover. It's all about light and hope. This book cover you probably won't get away with back in UK with me with an FN mini-me and a lot of ammunition around my neck. But here it's a lot better. So yeah, it's the US version of Relentless, and it was released on the 28th of November, and it will be on Amazon and Barnes and Noble for the US people that know that. And behind the scenes, I can't go into too much detail. I'm working on a show which involves the elite forces around the world on one of the mainstream networks, and that's pretty much as I can say for now. But a little teaser, yeah, watch this space next year.
Oh, it sounds really good. I can't wait, and I'm definitely going to get my hands on one of those books, Dean. Maybe I can get a signed copy, but yeah, I just
Of
want to
course,
say,
you can.
guys, that thank you. Just want to say, guys, that this is a quick fire podcast. It's usually 10 to 40 minutes and stuff, and you've got Dean here, who's such a just endless amount of everything that defines toughness and endurance and mental strength. And you can only touch on that so little in 4 questions and a little bit extra and stuff. But guys, pick up a book and just have a listen to this guy's story. I started in some of it, I've seen the YouTube, I've gone on his website loads. So much just to give and just to listen to. It's really powerful stuff. And I can only recommend this, guys. But hey, look, Dean, thank you so much for joining me today for the Talk4 podcast. This has been literally an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you for your time.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, Lou.
Awesome. Thank you guys for listening. So, this has been an absolute pleasure. And if you'd like to listen to our past episodes, go and have a look at our channel or channels. And if you'd like to listen in for our future ones, make sure to hit that subscribe button and spread some love by leaving a like and a comment. Signing off for now.